Let's take you now to Europe on our international stories, and COVID-19 and the lifting of restrictions or lack thereof are topical in Europe this week. Despite soaring COVID-19 infections, Denmark has lifted almost all of its restrictions, while other countries such as Germany keep theirs in place and go even further, such as Austria with implements a mandatory vaccine as of this week. Emmanuel Shays with our partners DW joins us for more from Europe on our crossover today. Are we seeing an end of the restrictions in Europe?
Well, we see some countries lifting their restrictions. Denmark, France, the UK, Ireland opted to get rid of most, if not of all, their restrictions in a bid to normalize life again, and that amidst a soaring number of infections in most European countries. But in other places, such as in Germany or in Austria, where those countries stay put with their own stringent measures to fight the pandemic. Starting this week, Austria implements a mandatory vaccine, while here in Germany, most places are only accessible if one is vaccinated and tested or got a booster shot, and there is no talk of removing masks for now. In fact, there are almost as many approaches to fight the COVID-19 pandemic as there are countries here in Europe.
The number of infections is soaring with the Omicron variant. Isn't it too early to get rid of the measures to fight the pandemic?
It's different approaches, different attitudes to deal with the pandemic, and we see that in spite of a soaring number of infections, here in Germany the 7-day incidence rate is skyrocketing at well over 1,200 per 100,000 inhabitants. In France we saw infections peaking at over 500,000 cases a day by the end of January. We simply see very different policies to fight the pandemic, and one of the arguments to ease the restrictions is that the Omicron variant, which is now dominant in Europe, seems to be a milder form than other forms of COVID-19. It seems to be so infectious despite the measures that some governments have simply chosen to loosen the restrictions regardless of the infection figures.
And finally, restrictions, no restrictions, how is that being viewed by the population?
Well, because the Omicron variant no longer seems to be as threatening as a virus as other forms of COVID-19, fewer people and fewer governments are worried about the pandemic than was the case 2 years ago. And here in Germany, while the majority of the population still supports the measures in place, there's also a third of the people who think that those measures are now going too far. And there's also a very vocal but very small minority of the population that takes to the streets every week to show their disapproval of the restrictions and of a possible mandatory vaccine. And some of those protests also do turn violent, while most see the far right tagging along. But amidst all that, the World Health Organization warned that it would be very premature to declare a victory or to stop the fight against COVID-19.
Well, let's see how that pans out. Emmanuel Shays, thank you very much. He's with our partners, the DW in Germany. And that's it for World News.